Or maybe this. Oh, yeah, it's bigger than the other.
Hello? Oh god, yeah. Okay. Is there sound now? Yes. Oh, no. Oh, mistake. Sorry, everyone listening from far. Good, right. So Bower, replaced nowadays. NPM, useful. Yarn is even better. So Yarn was created, I believe, by Facebook. Yes, nods from Michael. And it solves a lot of problems with NPM, in particular around like sort of locking your dependencies and installing quickly. And from now on, you should probably be, if you're choosing yourself, use Yarn. So Yarn actually takes packages from NPM, but just installs them in a slightly different way. Indeed manages the dependency hierarchy a bit better. Also, if you're using Node, use NVM, Node Version Manager. That way you can use multiple versions of Node for different projects, because likely you'll need to run a legacy project at some point. It's useful being able to transfer your version quickly. So a quick detour into package.json and versions and Semver. So package number of X, Y, Z. X stands for the major version, Y minor version, Z patch version. Hope that's not particularly news for anyone. And in Node, when you specify, or NPM package JSONs, when you specify a dependency, go on.
What do you mean by major minor patch?
Yes, I'm about to come to that. Yeah. In fact, that is the next slide, is it? No? Oh no, I've just got a note to myself explain Semver. Good. Okay. Great. Cool. So, the idea with a library is that it specifies an API that your users can use. Right? So you might have a certain number of exports that you use, some functions have certain signatures, and you might want to change that library down the road. So if you're making a small change, just a change that doesn't affect the API of your application, but maybe fixes a bug, then that should be a patch bump. If you're making changes to the API in a non-breaking change manner, so that is you're adding a new method to the API, you're enabling more features, like expanding the set of versions that a parameter can take, then you make a minor change. And if at any point you are making breaking changes to that API, so you're changing or removing methods, then you should make a major change. And that idea is called Semver or semantic versioning. And if you're making an NPM library that you're publishing more broadly, then you should ideally try and follow that. So because everyone's supposed to be doing this, Node gives you this tilde and caret thing. So when you install an NPM dependency, it will come by default with this caret, which says, I've installed that version 1.0.0, but I will accept any version with a higher minor version or higher patch version, because ideally it should be backwards compatible with the current version. I say ideally because people don't actually follow Semver in practice, unfortunately. So you do get breaking changes introduced, you do get bugs introduced if you rely on this. So that's something to bear in mind. So the way around this is that at build time, we say, I want to fix the versions of my dependencies. So if someone else were to build again, they would get the same versions of those dependencies. So unfortunately, just specifying the exact version number in your package.json isn't enough. Say, for example, I have this package A that specifies versions of packages B and D. Package B can then specify it allows 2.0, 0.0 and higher, which can mean that the version of package C that B depends on can actually be an arbitrary version. So even if you just specify a fixed version here, you can still get a different sort of hierarchy of dependencies pulled in, which can mean things break. I'm not sure if anyone's had problems with builds and NPM breaking a year or two down the road when things are unpublished or things are changed, but it definitely happens. Also, you can introduce security issues, right? So someone comes along, someone with nefarious ideas, or someone leaks their NPM key and decides to publish a dodgy version of package C, then that security vulnerability can be pulled into your app later on without you doing anything obvious to fix it. So NPM decided they'd do a thing called shrink wrap. So the idea is that at build time, you can create this file which will list the version of your dependency and all the sort of dependencies of that dependency, and it'll save it to a file. unfortunately, that's a pain to use in npm4. It's a bit better now in npm5. It's automatically created when you do an install, but still not ideal. Yarn does a better job with this, and its sort of yarn.lock file is sort of reproducible and sort of smaller, and is sort of the recommended way of doing this shrink wrapping. And I want to sort of point you at this thing called SNYK, which you can use. It's a website that will check your application for security vulnerabilities in your dependencies, and indeed the dependency of your dependencies. And it will flag up any versions you pulled in which are, have security vulnerabilities in, basically. So I recommend you run your app through that at some point.
Started doing that for you to some extent as well. I had like a really old repo that just got a notification saying you're relying on that install version jQuery.
Yeah, which is awesome. So that only works with public repos. You can also enable it for private repos if indeed you can. Go on, Mike.
Is that actually scanning the code for vulnerabilities, or is that they have a flag list somewhere?
Yeah, they've got a list of versions which are susceptible to vulnerabilities. But indeed, they can work out if you're pulling in sort of down your dependency hierarchy into secure versions as well, which is really useful. So just bear that in mind. Cool. Anything else? Yeah, the other reasons why Yarn's better, but take my word from it, use Yarn. It's probably the take home.
So
go on. Sorry.
Anything within that major version?
Carrot's major version, same major version, so it could be higher minor version or patch version. Yeah. Tilde is just the same minor version. And this is for all things with a major version of 1 or greater. It's all a bit different if you have 0 or below, but don't worry about that. It doesn't come up much anymore. Right, build pipeline. Do these things mean things to people? Grunt, Gulp, Webpack, Node, hopefully, yeah. So my main recommendation is don't use Grunt or Gulp. They are old, they're buggy. Gulp in particular sounds great, but it's broken at its core, really. Grunt, one of the issues with these is that they have lots of plugins built by randomers on the internet. They might have 5 plugins for the same thing, and 4 of them are broken in different ways. Working out which one to use is a pain. Webpack is great. I'll come on to that in a second. It's useful for front-end development, and it can pull all your code together. If you're going to be writing a build pipeline, just use Node and npm scripts. So you can have like npm run build.js, and it can just literally spin up some JavaScript, and you can run your all your tools from there. So Webpack is sort of the de facto standard nowadays for browser and JavaScript delivery. And it's good because it just works, really. You can have some configuration for doing various things. It's got good source map support. You can require your CSS with the JavaScript. It pulls in npm libraries by sort of creating a single JavaScript output from your JavaScript input. Yeah, but there are a few gotchas. So obviously, if you're pulling all your massive npm package dependency hierarchy into one JavaScript file, that file is going to be quite big. So when you start installing dependencies, just think about it. Do I need this one? Do you need to be quite so big? Also, some npm modules are node specific. That's less nowadays, but there are still some. So watch out. You can't install every npm module and expect it to work on the front end. Cool, JavaScript testing. It's a bit of a minefield. It's great. You should always test your JavaScript. But when you start think, well, how am I going to actually test my JavaScript? You start hitting these questions. Which assertions framework should I use? So you have to go off and install one. You've got Jasmine, Chai, Search.js. Mocking framework. I can use Jasmine, or I can get a bit better with Synon.js. There are various other mocking libraries you can choose. Choose your build tool. I need to do like npm tests. I can use all these for it. I need a test runner. What runtime do I use? So Mocha and Karma can spin up like a browser for you and use that to run tests. JavaScript engine, so that can either be in a browser or can be just a node. An integration test, I need to choose my Selenium server, so which, oh god, it's a pain. So you might see the commonality here is Jest. So again, it's something that Facebook have created for making it easier to do this stuff. So you can configure it with a small bit of your package JSON, and it has your assertions framework, mocking framework. Test run is quite nice. It runs in Node, so you don't have to care about your browsers and stuff. It has quite good React support as well. Just give it a try on your next project. Try using Jest and see if it's less painful than setting up millions of config files for all these other things. Yeah, just really quickly talking about integration tests as well. Browser stack's quite fun. We have a license for manual browser stack stuff. But if you can get your client to pay for like a browser stack account, then you can run your Selenium tests in the cloud. So it saves having to try and set it up on Jenkins, because setting up sort of a browserless, headless browser to run your Selenium tests can be a bit of a pain, but something to think about. Any questions on this one? Yeah, Mike?
Is Jest doing each individual aspect as well as
Depends what you want. It's a bit lightweight on the mocking side, I've noticed, and assertions, but you can always add in custom things additionally to it.
You can also use, for mocking at least, you can just use another framework. So like I use Scion with Jest, and that's fine.
Yeah. It just gives you a lot out of the box, so you don't have to think about it quite so much when you first set things up, which makes life a bit easier. And it's got quite a nice test runner as well. It gives you nice, pretty results.
Is it going to run the command line, or have they got a solid Visual Studio integration?
I imagine there are plugins for Visual Studio. I don't know offhand. But it's good enough to run on the command line. Cool. I'll try and make things a bit more interesting now. Languages and frameworks. Well, I say more interesting, it's still going to be boring, but there we go. Hopefully the end of the presentation will be more interesting. Right. Cool. JS languages in inverted commas. There's quite a few. Well, they're all JavaScript really. But there's obviously vanilla JavaScript. So that's like apparently what vanilla looks like. So that's like this writing exactly what's going to be run in your browser, say. There's sort of ES or Next, so ES6 or more features. So all the modern stuff, and you can use Babel or Babel to sort of transpile that to JavaScript and run in your browser. There's TypeScript, which I hope most of you have heard of, and Flow is sort of Facebook's offering on this front, which is slightly better for dropping into a code base that starts on JavaScript, or at least modern versions of Flow are. I know Sam's had some problems trying to get it to work using old versions of Flow. Basically, don't use vanilla JavaScript. 3 out of 10. It's, I don't know, just making sure it's like you're supporting all these old browsers is a pain. Babel's a bit better. You have to remember to like drop in your polyfills yourselves often and things. You need a lot of different plugins to get it to work. I'm a TypeScript evangelist. Big fan, and I'll come on to why in a second. And Flow is pretty good too. Still a bit newer. So Ben, your experiences of Flow quite good, generally?
Still jury's out, I think.
Still jury's out.
I also haven't used TypeScript, so.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I think TypeScript's really useful. So why? I'll come on to it in a second. Actually, turns out my slides are slightly different order to I thought. So npm is great with all the libraries. So this is a graph of how many libraries are different package managers. So npm is the line in green. Some of a questionable quality, which is true of any kind of sort of system like this. There are lots of good ones out there. Normally,
what year is that?
That is a good question. I don't actually know.
200,000.
200,000. Yeah, I think that's this year, but I might be mistaken. I might have thought this something old. I'll come back and let you know. Label your axes better. I just want to talk about one in particular, which is Lodash, which I love. So Lodash is a library of sort of functional functions methods. And basically anything you want to do in JavaScript has probably been done better already in Lodash. It gives you just a set of utilities to use, basically. So things like filtering and mapping, using collections, iterating over things. Just give it a bash. Any project that you're writing in JavaScript, you should probably be putting in Lodash as well. The docs are also great, so have a look. Okay, now we're on the TypeScript detour. So why do I like using TypeScript? Having types increases your code confidence. Fewer tests are therefore kind of required. I don't actually like writing tests very much. I put it out there. I will certainly tests that don't do much, and having a type engine will make sure that because normal JavaScript's so awful, you have to write tests of pretty much anything. And if you can catch a lot of those errors with type information, that's all for it. It also means your IDE support is a lot better, so you have a more enjoyable coding experience. For those who have touched like TypeScript back in the past, TypeScript 2 is a lot better than TypeScript 1. It pulls in types from NPM nowadays, so it's much more straightforward. You don't have to rely on this typings module for installing your types anymore. If you're creating types yourself, then you should create local module typings instead of global typings. I'm not sure if that makes sense to anyone, but they're out the window now. The control flow analysis is much improved in TypeScript 2. So this example at the bottom left, if message is a string or undefined, and you know it's not undefined, that must be a string. And this is integrated into IDEs and things, and that's much improved compared to TypeScript 1. So it requires fewer type assertions throughout the code. And the last point is that TypeScript has some great support for transpiling to lower versions of JavaScript. So if I want support like old browsers, then I can use all these modern features, and TypeScript will add the correct polyfills automatically, which is something that's a bit better than Babel.
How is it for configuring it with Webpack these days? Because I remember it used to be a little bit of a headache.
There's this TS loader thing that's quite good. Awesome TS loader seems to be quite good. You can also do a build separately and Webpack it up once you've done, but it's better to use Webpack's watch facility. I haven't had particular problems with Webpacking it, but other people might have thoughts on it. Is that anything else? Yeah, I generally find it all right. A lot of these things are, thank God. The main negative of TypeScript is that sort of typing up external modules is a bit of a pain, but it's still worthwhile doing, I think. It's worthwhile including and taking that pain. Cool. One thing I need to point out is the module format. So unfortunately, because JavaScript's changed so much over the years, there are a few module formats in use. So there's this asynchronous module definition, AMD, that's used in require.js and things. So it's particularly useful on the front end. You don't have to have one big block of code up front. The modules can pull in each other sort of dynamically. Then there's two versions of sort of module format that's used on the server. There's common.js, which is like the old Node format, and there's the ES6 module definition. Essentially, the main difference is that it's common.js stuff. You can have your module exports be anything. So it could be a function. It doesn't necessarily need to be a set of key value pairs of things you export. Whereas your ES6 module format, you export sort of individual bits, and essentially you have a sort of key value set of exports. It's sort of important which one your library is. When you type it up, you need to know how you import the things. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that this is a thing that you'd think about. It's a thing that frequently catches people out when they first start importing libraries from NPM. But hopefully your library will come with types, and that will take care of all this for you. If it doesn't, then you might need to look at the JavaScript output and work out which one it is.
Can you import modules of one type from another type, or are all of them supported in one type?
Yeah, so particularly these two, when you're writing your JavaScript, your transpiler will be able to support both types. And indeed, if you're outputting, your transpiler will be able to transpile to AMD if you want it to. They're all sort of interchangeable to some extent. Indeed, if you import a library from NPM, it will normally be written in this thing called universal module definition, which actually supports all these types automatically. But your transpiler will put it in one of them, so let's work out which one it does. So just a heads up, come back to this slide in the future if you get confused. Hopefully it will give you some ideas as to how to use it. UI libraries. Oh, I forgot to put in the delay. So the scores are up front. Spoilers, yeah. So React is sort of, well, it's kind of one. It's most popular amongst its users. It's most popular amongst downloads. It's most popular amongst job seekers. No one really talks about React Knockout anymore. Embers, similarly, they're kind of replaced. Everyone really likes React. Angular, Angular sort of 2 and above, this new Angular sort of in TypeScript, is popular, but it's not as popular as React. And its reviews amongst people who use it, more positive than Angular 1, certainly, but still not as popular as React. Yeah, I'm kind of a React evangelist, but other people might disagree. Another big boy on the scene is Vue. It's quite new. It's sold as sort of drop-inable. So if you might sort of be tempted to use jQuery, then perhaps try Vue. It can sort of wrap around normal sort of HTML and give you sort of interactive experiences quite easily. I haven't used it myself, but I hear it's quite fun. And that's sort of replaced sort of Knockout and Ember for lighter weight frameworks nowadays. So quick detour. What time is it? Okay. Managing React state. So people have probably heard of Redux. The main idea with React is that so you have components and they talk to their children. So they tell the children what state they're in, and the children will they tell their children what properties they should have, and the children then render their children. If you have a button, say at the bottom of your template hierarchy, of your component hierarchy, that needs to talk to things higher up, that's done with callbacks in traditional React. So your component will pass down a callback to the one below, and you also have like on button clicks do this, that will come up and up and up, which is right faff. So you kind of want to have some common store of information that your components can sort of get their state from. And indeed some way for a component to go and update the store and say this thing's happened, some sort of event-based thing. So Redux is a common way of doing that. There are other alternatives called Flux, sorry, it's another one. But you can also get away with vanilla React, like it's not that bad, and Redux adds a lot of boilerplate. Having talked to teams of software that use Redux a lot, it's a bit of a faff to get your head around, but then it's just a lot of extra writing to do. We've used Vanilla.js, sort of Vanilla React, on quite a few projects, and it's been kind of okay, if you're careful. You've got to choose whichever one is suitable. Flux is slightly more lightweight than Redux. We've got more experience in software with Redux, so possibly preferred. Not really JavaScript, but a quick detour because it's useful. Don't write vanilla CSS anymore. That's hopefully no news to anyone. Then the question is less or Sass. Again, just want to say Sass is one. Most things nowadays use Sass or SCSS. If you have better support for less, you can use it, but Sass is probably the way to go if you're creating a new project. Go on.
What are your thoughts on inline styling in JavaScript?
I don't mind it. Fairly popular. Yeah, there are some libraries which you can, particularly with React, that you can sort of specify your styles inside your like React components, which then match things up with hashes and things. I quite like that approach. Yeah, that's an alternative. But if you're writing something like this, then go with Sass. Also, use an auto prefixer. Do people know what an auto prefixer is? No. So old browsers will have like support for some new styling with like, I don't know, moz-x or like webkit-x. An auto prefixer will basically add those in for you, so you don't have to think about it. You can write more modern CSS, and it will backport all these things for you automatically. And you can incorporate that into your build process, so into Webpack or into whichever build tool you're using. So you can install that from npm and use it. So like a 5-minute job. Go on.
Compiling Sass at runtime, deploy time, or build time?
I normally do it at compile time. You can have a Sass watch.
And then you commit the.
Ideally, you don't commit the CSS, and it's also done at build time on the server. But I don't. It's not the end of the world if you're committing your CSS. It's certainly a lot easier on some projects. It does integrate very well with your Webpack build and things. If you've got a JavaScript build already, which you should probably have, then it's easy to do at build time. If you're just using JavaScript, so IDE based compilation, that's fine in my opinion, but ideally it will be done in build time. Yeah, cool. That's just a reminder for me. Tooling. Hey. IDE. Oh, what's happened? Oh, I just knocked that thing. Sorry. So wait, 3, 2, 1, come on. Oh. That's how hips refill. Yeah. Let's try again. No, is it gonna work? No. Let's try again. So my main point here is that it doesn't really matter. People have preferences on IDE. IntelliJ, Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code all have great support for JavaScript and indeed TypeScript. I quite like Visual Studio Code. Just it's quite lightweight. It's got good support for TypeScript, in particular the latest TypeScript features. It's normally the first to integrate with sort of the latest version of TypeScript. It pulls in typings for JavaScript modules, which I think these are also starting to do now, but it was sort of ahead of the curve when it started to do that. In fact, quick anecdote, when they first released it, it was getting so much information, typing information from NPM, it sort of brought down NPM for a day. They had to temporarily revert that hotfix back to prevent them from overloading NPM with all the typing information all the clients were downloading. I quite like it. It's got a lot of plugins as well. So give it a try if you haven't already. Mike's now shaking his head. Is that? No? Okay. We had a horror story about it. Linting. I think you should have some linting on your project. Have a linter with IDE integration, or make sure your devs are using it on your team. TypeScript TSLint is perfectly good. I'm an evangelist for not being overly prescriptive. So if you have a rule that you're hating, just get rid of it. I don't know, Harry maybe disagrees or agrees. No, yeah, I hate overly prescriptive linters. You can also get prettifiers that you add into your build, which will automatically clean up your code. I don't really like it that much, but it can be useful. Up to you. That's basically all I have to say there. Just takes your mind off fixing inconsistencies. Cool. Finally, the slightly more interesting thing, hopefully, actually writing JavaScript. So what is good about the JS stack? Why do I like it? Essentially, it has a simplistic execution model, and it's easy to write. So do people know about the event loop in JavaScript? Sort of blank faces. JavaScript is essentially sort of single-threaded. It has a system of one thread will go off and do something. At some point, it will stop, have nothing else to do, and then it will pick up somewhere else. So yeah, a request comes back. That will then get added to a list of things it needs processing, and that will then get processed. So you don't really have to care so much about threading and memory issues between threads and stuff. It just takes care of itself, really. You get native serialization, so JSON and stuff is built in. Obviously, promises and async await it's good. Most languages have this, but it basically takes care of a lot of stuff for you, which is kind of nice. Cool. Let's keep going. So, I've just said how great it is to write modern JavaScript, but I would say try and avoid some bits of JavaScript. Things which are confusing or weird probably shouldn't be in your code. So sure, you can understand the prototype chain, understand inheritance of JavaScript and stuff, but try explaining that to everyone on your team. It's a bit of a pain. You probably don't need to use a lot of object-oriented stuff in JavaScript. Indeed, should you even have a class, kind of just use a JavaScript object and some methods that build in it. What else do I want to say here? Also, some things transpile a bit weirdly. So this is confusing. I mean, how many people here have been stung by this in JavaScript at some point? Right, that's basically everyone, apart from Phil, who's like, what's JavaScript? I just want my free lunch. Yeah, just don't use it. Like most things, normally you can avoid it. If you're using classes, then you kind of have to use this. But just use it when there's no alternative. Arrow functions are useful because they you don't have to care about this anymore. Functions replace what this is, but arrow functions don't. And a transpiler can transpile arrow functions back to thises and stuff for old browsers. So again, you don't have to care about that. Cool. Yeah, even libraries like jQuery, which encourage the use of this, they normally let you use an alternative parameter. So you can normally avoid it. Cool. Yeah, and things like this can also confuse the debugger, even with source maps. So again, that's another reason to not do that. Cool. And now finally, I'll finish with some fun things you can do in modern JavaScript that you might not be aware of, and that might help make your life easier, or just make you enjoy coding a bit more. So the first thing, I've already talked about polyfills, haven't I? Vaguely. But I will flag up which constructs might need polyfills as we go through. So yeah. The first thing is const versus let. So this replaces the keyword var in older versions of JavaScript. These have slightly different sort of block scoping semantics. It's not really very important. What I like is I want to evangelize the use of const over let. Most tutorials will use let. It's sort of a replacement for var. But const says I'm defining what this variable is now, and it won't change in the future. So whenever I see x, I know exactly what it is. Let says I'm allowed to do that. It's not a particularly big difference, but if you use const everywhere and you suddenly see a let, you're like, something strange is going on here. This code is doing something a bit atypical, not very functional. I need to take care of it more about what this is doing. So things that use like sort of for loops and then change things might use let, and it just gives you a bit of a heads up that your code is doing something a bit weird. Just to point out that it doesn't stop you mutating the object itself. So, for example, I can change the value of x.a. I just can't reassign x there. Not too complicated. Like most languages have support for this, but if you're starting to write, try using const. Toby. Oh, you could, yeah, you could do, yeah, exactly. Next up is.
Sorry, how does var interact with those?
So these say that you can't. These will scope the variable to your block you're currently in, including like for loops and things, and if statements. Var doesn't do that, but var is kind of equivalent to let.
Right, okay.
So you shouldn't be using var anymore.
And var scopes it to the function but not the block?
Yeah, essentially.
Originally, in JavaScript, you have global scope function, so that's it.
Yeah. But these will transpile to var, so they have to give you compile time safety. But if you're transpiling to old versions of JavaScript, they will still use var. So you can shoot yourself in the foot if you're not entirely careful, but your compiler or transpiler should catch it for you. Something from vanilla.js that much of you maybe have seen. This is idiomatic JavaScript. This says if A is truthy, then use A, otherwise use B. So the OR operator actually returns a value in JavaScript, which is slightly confusing when you first see it, but sort of makes sense. It sort of lets you do constructs like this. So if A is defined, wait, I've done that wrong. Sorry, that should be ands. So ands also work in the same way. So ands return the right, wait. If A is truthy, then it returns B, otherwise it returns A in ands. So if these were ands, ampersands, then only if A had a value and A.B had a value and A.B had a value, then it would use A.B.C. And if you added an OR on the end, you could provide a default value in that case too. So it's quite useful just to be aware of that. Helps make your JavaScript a bit shorter. Next up, which this is one of the syntaxes I really like, it's reasonably new. It's the object and array spread operator. So say I have my object x, and I wanted to add some values to it. Say it's a config object, I want to add some more stuff to it. I can just specify .x, .x, and that basically iterates through the properties of x, and it will add them to the object y. And indeed, it can replace and overwrite things with anything that comes later. So it's useful for combining objects together, basically.
Shallow copy or deep copy?
Shallow copy, yeah. So it's also useful for cloning objects as well. And you can do the same with arrays, a bit less useful, but you can basically flatten arrays using it. Yeah, it's quite useful working with POJOs as well, and just combining things together. I find it surprisingly useful.
It doesn't have to go at the beginning. You could do .x, .y.
Yeah, definitely. And indeed, you could put your a first, so you could have this bit first. And then if a was in x, then it would use the value from x, otherwise it would use that value. So they can be in any order as well. It's quite neat.
Is .x an expression in its own right? Can you just write const y equals .x?
I don't think so. No, I think it's only valid inside that. Behind the scenes, it uses object.assign. So TypeScript will include the object.assign polyfill for you, but you'll need to include it if you're using an old version of Babel. What was that, Tim?
I was just thinking, if you then change something on y, would it go back to x, or is it effectively a copy?
No, it's essentially, well, it's a shallow clone. So if you change a.b or something, then it would propagate through. But
It's equivalent to calling .x in braces and then setting a new value on that.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. You can also do this in reverse. So you can do array and object destructuring. Say you have an array, you want to get out the first and second value, you can do that. If you have an object, you can also get out those values. It's not quite as useful, but it can be useful sometimes. And now the important thing, I think, is async await. So this lets you write promises in JavaScript like they were synchronous code, just like you have async await in C# and other languages. But it's really useful. You do it with the async keyword. It requires the promises to be available globally. So you might well need a polyfill for that. But you can use it in browsers. You can use it in all browsers as well with the polyfills in place. You can also put try catches around, and it will convert that into a sort of a catch statement. Yeah, if you're using modern JavaScript, you have a choice of using this. To use async await, it's just clearer than using promises. Promises are a faff to use, I find. .thenning everywhere and all the little, God, it's just not as nice as it should be. Cool. Another thing, you can have iterators in JavaScript. I'm not sure if any of you know about this, but you can have things like, again, from C#, like you can have a get numbers iterator with a yield keyword. And you also have async iterators, which combine the two concepts, which basically give you your streams and stuff. This is ES next. This is like not entirely fully it's spec'd out in the ECMAScript specification, but it's not 100% drilled down. But you can still use it. It's pretty much locked in now. And again, you can use that with transpilers. Yeah, kind of useful. Frida's done some stuff with async iterators. It's really quite fun. Cool. So that's everything what I had to cover. Just a big mass of stuff. Hopefully it's kind of useful. Hopefully not too boring. Any questions from anyone? Or any extra things they want to add? Any recommendations I'd like to share with the room?
I'd recommend Wallaby if people are doing testing in JavaScript. Basically, mCrunch for JavaScript, so it runs your tests in the background inline, kind of puts any errors or logging inline in your code for you.
So for the room, that was Wallaby as a sort of an mCrunch copy, which lets you run your type tests in your IDE line by line. It's very useful. Yeah, and Jest also has code coverage metrics as well. Straight in. Mike?
CoffeeScript is completely dead.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're using CoffeeScript now, then my sympathies. Yeah, don't start using CoffeeScript. Definitely TypeScript.
Do you have an opinion on WebStorm?
versus VS Code?
I've not used it personally. I think it's quite good. It's similar to IntelliJ in terms of its support levels.
So it's basically IntelliJ. Most of them are.
Yeah.
I prefer it. But
It's a bit of a streamlined version of IntelliJ.
Is officially the difference between all of the language-specific ones and IntelliJ is they're like guaranteed to be. JetBrains officially say they'll always have feature parity. But the only difference is that in the language-specific ones, you can just open a folder as a project, and you can't do that in IntelliJ because IntelliJ doesn't know which language you're going to use.
That makes sense.
subscriptions to individual ones are cheaper.
Yeah, I think they can occasionally lag one way or the other slightly with features, but they generally aim to maintain feature parity.
Tim?
Is there any tools to get your bundle size down in Webpack so you're not loading huge amounts, or is it just insane and don't import every NPM package in the world?
Yes. You can. Something you can do is you can like create bundles of your code. So you can say that these bits should be one bundle and this bit should be another bundle. So say you have some common code that's shared between all your pages, then you can extract that to a common bundle that can be cached separately. So that's sort of a mitigation as opposed to a prevention. You can sometimes find like browser-specific imports which are just kept smaller and things. Say, for example, if you're using moment.js, they have one without any localization options, because without localization options, it's about a tenth the size. Definitely think about that. But basically, using your common sense it's good. Lodash, you can import individual modules instead of an entire thing, and quite a few libraries have support for importing, say, like Lodash/filter or something.
You can also, if you can't remember the terminology, you can like mark them as external, like if you want to pull it from CDN instead.
You can. That's also true. Yes. So yeah, for the purposes of the live stream, you can mark things as external in Webpack and then pull it from the CDN if you allow it to be on the page already. Anyone else? Is that Greg? No. It's just cool. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Hope you learned something.